Okay. Hello. Awesome. We
Hey,
should be able to connect now. Can we?
cool.
Great, great.
Yeah, this seems a bit
Finally.
better.
At
Yeah.
last, at last.
Um, no, I just checked Akamai. So there's a problem in the link between China and Japan at the moment. It's under attack from a few sources. So it is slowing down
Under attack?
outbound traffic from China.
Are you
Yep.
saying that the Chinese government is launching the attack
No,
now, right now?
we don't know who. No, someone is. We don't know who.
Someone, but
Um,
if that someone could, the government has probably hired that someone to attack, to launch the attack, right? It's pretty,
yeah, it's taking down the link. It's slowing down net performance in Japan. US has got issues too.
oh shit. So they are basically attempting to sever all internet, uh, the links towards overseas.
Don't know what they're doing. Like it could even be via a virus. It's just
Oh my
yeah, the
God.
traffic usage is high and it doesn't seem human made. Which being New Year's Eve as well, you're going to have a lot of human traffic. So those two combined, it's going to cause a few problems tonight.
Uh-huh. That sounds kind of insidious to me. It's like sending some.
No, it always goes on.
It's like
There's always something happening.
it sounds like the Reaper indoctrination, Mass Effect. They're sending a agents to Australia, to Japan, to the States, and they attempt to sever the connections, the circumvention attempt from inside China. That's shit, man. But nevertheless, I managed to re-establish the connection.
Yep.
Awesome.
So I sent you a link if you want to look at the threats.
Uh-huh. I'll have a look afterwards.
Yeah.
So, do you what sort of questions do you think I should ask during the interview? Do you think we are doing the interview now, or we should be doing that later?
I don't mind. That's completely fine. Just let me know what you want to talk about, and I can
Sure.
because we don't have sort of a set agenda. I may not be able to answer everything straight away, but I can get back to you
Uh-huh. Okay.
at a later date for anything that I haven't memorized. But yeah,
Oh, okay. Let's get your let's get the shit on your end done. Then let's allow me to ask
sure,
you some several tough questions. Um,
sure thing.
First of all, yes. Do you think Christian churches, particularly Protestant churches, are making a positive change and impact to the current Australian communities?
Um, Protestant in particular are the primary drivers behind the new nationalism in Australia.
Uh-huh.
So while on the front they're very, very open to bringing everyone in, they also drive through policy and they're actually getting a lot more control in the government because they are growing. And your traditional churches, like your Catholic churches, are shrinking. And
Uh-huh.
your specifically your Pentecostal churches, which have really absorbed a lot of older traditional churches recently,
Uh-huh.
are gaining a lot of power, and the policies that they're pushing through
Uh-huh.
and the lifestyles that they're pushing through are extremely divisive. They're going to cause a lot of problems and potentially civil war in Australia.
Civil War. So
Yes.
you really think that type of the civil war could really occur to Australia if the Protestant churches keep pushing
The
the
traditional
fire.
Protestant churches aren't the traditional Protestant churches aren't too bad. They're actually quite divided amongst themselves.
Uh-huh.
So even within the different dioceses of different churches, they've got different views on a lot of things. Some are trying to keep with the traditions. Some are more liberal and trying to change with the times. But the Protestant churches per se are not really putting out so much hateful words. Like there's a few things that have been signalled.
Such as?
Such as the Anglican Church spending. But this wasn't the whole Anglican Church in Australia. This was just the Sydney Diocese spending $1 million on the No campaign for same-sex marriage, which I don't mind a church being against same-sex marriage. That's no problem. But that does create a lot of division in a country like Australia, where it's very, very important that we don't have division because we are a multicultural country. So the more division we have, the more strength it gives to your ultra-nationalists, your far-right wing, who do want to create an us and a them, and then do eventually want to eradicate the them out of Australia. And while the them at the moment might be Islam, once they've done that, they will go on to then non-Christians and then non-Protestants and then non-white people and then non-straight people, and continues down that. And throughout history, every time that you've got ultra-nationalism and a form of nationalism that is built through division and not through unity, which is the opposite to Japan's version of nationalism, it always slips into fascism or even worse, Nazism, and that's exactly where this country is heading.
Nationalism. So you really think nationalism hurts a lot? It hurts the...
It can have a place, but it needs to have... Nationalism cannot work in a multicultural country. It can work in a place like Japan, which is a monoculture, and it probably has helped them a lot. But in a country like Australia, where you've got so many different people and less than half of our population really fits into this nationalist image that is trying to be pushed at the moment, which is your fundamentalist Christian, white, straight, middle class, or even working class, but the Catholics were generally working class before. That's less than half our population. So nationalism cannot work, and the form of nationalism that is coming about is not about unity. It is about division, and is being driven by the church that are expanding at the moment, which are absorbing the Protestant churches, which is your Pentecostal churches. They have a lot of pull in our government at the moment. And you can see that a lot of the far-right groups, so the hate groups, the anti-Islam groups, the even just the outright, yes, we are Nazi groups, are generally related to these Pentecostal churches. So it's something that I'm really trying to create a lot of awareness about at the moment in our government. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of very senior government ministers involved very closely with those particular institutions as well. And one thing that we found about the Pentecostal churches, even in the recent Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sex abuse, the Pentecostal churches kind of got a free pass. They got left out majorly.
So you mean, when you mention free pass, does that mean that the Pentecostal churches like Hillsong Church, they got cast out?
Yes.
They didn't actually have a say?
So what happened, because Pentecostalism, it does have a big history in Australia, but it's only recently that it's really taken off, and has sort of become its own brand of church. Now, the problem is that this Royal Commission was looking into past transgressions, but what's happened is, even over the last 15 to 20 years, the structure of the Pentecostal institution has changed. Like, it's completely collapsed and rebuilt itself in another way, then rebranded itself another way, then rebranded itself another way. So there is no way to examine or investigate the Pentecostal institution, because it's something that's evolved so quickly. And if you look at one entity, that entity's lasted 5 or 10 years, and then there's a new entity that pops up with the same people, but it's a different structure and different governance. Yes.
Different vessels, same
is a problem.
people.
It has
Different vessels,
yes,
same people, same bullshit. I see that.
yes. At the same time, Pentecostalism has had, especially for Australian youth, has had a good effect too. They've sort of got rid of the Catholic traditions that were really, really that Australian youth just couldn't understand or get on board with, and they've sort of created their own brand of Christianity. And that has been successful, and it has given hope or direction to a lot of people. So I'm not completely vilifying Pentecostalism. I am pointing the finger at some of the leaders and how they're allowing a large portion of their congregation to start seeing the world.
So, one more question. Do you think that I should, or we should, continue to attend the church, the church events hosted by Hillsong? Even let's say for me, once I got a chance to return to Sydney, Australia, do you think I should keep attending their events, their parties, and worshiping?
Okay, I look at it this way: as being a Christian, there is no requirement of a Christian to attend church.
Yeah,
you do need to worship.
It's not mandatory.
Yes,
but it's optional.
So this comes down to you. Does that environment help you? If it does, then by all means go.
If you say so.
So for your personal being, if you think that it's helpful and it helps you create friendships or helps you make decisions or helps you make build confidence or something, then by all means attend. Don't attend blindly, like listen and actually think about what's being said. And if something doesn't sit right with you, then feel free to question it or feel free to look elsewhere.
In fact,
I think one of the main things with the Pentecostal groups is be careful how you spend your money. And when you do spend your money, try to understand what it's being used for, what purpose it's being used for. And decide if that is a good thing or a bad thing, and if that is aligned with your values or not. Pentecostalism, more than any other church group in Australia, is very, very business oriented. They build a lot of businesses. They build a lot of very, very highly profitable businesses using tax-free dollars.
Tax-free dollars, shit. So
yes, which is a very unfair advantage. Now, under the Australian Constitution, we cannot advantage one religion over another. Unfortunately, the High Court in Australia has found they basically define what a religion is. And a religion is defined very narrowly in the courts of Australia. And if your religion does not have some supreme being, it is not classified as a religion. And even if you do have a church and a fellowship and a doctrine and all that, and you are helping people and providing charity, you are still not classified as a church and you don't have the same protections. So they're following like humanism, which this is also something a lot of churches don't understand about humanism. Humanism itself is a non-religion practiced in a religious way, but it's also a plurality. So whereas a lot of Christian churches will say you must believe in the one God and you can't follow anything else, it's this way and no other way, you can be a Christian and a humanist at the same time.
We do.
Yes, you can be. Unfortunately, humanists don't classify as a religion in this country and don't have the same advantages or the same pull in government.
So basically, the Australian government is the government itself is going separate ways from humanism and the doctrine of Christianity.
One of the main things about humanism is it really tries to put the importance behind a secular country. Now, being a multicultural country, like Australia is very multicultural, and that's actually something the far right section of these Pentecostal groups are really pushing for. They're trying to end multiculturalism in Australia. They want to bring back the White Australia policy, etc. One of the main reasons is with multiculturalism, you must have a secular system, and Australia is secular under our constitution, section 116, but it is weakly worded. And there is a movement at the moment to try to overthrow that and not be secular. Secular allows everyone to practice their religion and doesn't allow the government to favour any one religion over another. Mm-hmm. It's actually quite important. So secularism, while it does give strength to movements like atheism and humanism, it does also give a lot of strength and protection to your traditional religions as well. Mm-hmm. So in a country like Australia, secularism is really, really important, but we've got a drive at the moment by a certain number of parliaments to basically end secularism and give more freedom to religions, but only the religions that they like.
Allow me to ask what sort of evidence you have to support your claim that Hillsong Church they are actually doing something that is against Australian values, and
I don't think I've asserted that. I have said that their behaviour is suspicious, but also the way that money is spent is not really to the benefit of Australia or to their congregation. It is generally done in a business manner. Now, like lots of churches, they do not reveal their books. So everything is hush-hush, and that's where if you're trying to lead and show the world this is the way to live life and this is the way to be a better person, but then you've got a whole bunch of secrets that you don't want people to see, to me that's really, really suspicious. I think if you want to be a leader, you need to show what you're doing and not hide what you're doing.
That really sounds suspicious to me as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It really makes you.
Like I know from a business perspective, like lots of people do have their trade secrets, especially in traditional business models. That's starting to change as a cultural shift at the moment, where people are more open and they show exactly how they're doing business and they leave their books open. But Hillsong being a relatively new church, it's sort of been around for around 40 years in one shape or form. But that's still relatively young. They should be able to adapt quite easily compared to your more historical institutions like the Anglican Church or the Catholic Church. Like the Catholics are one of the most traditional churches around, and even during the last few debates around religion, they've been one of the more sensible voices, which is really odd. So a lot of the new churches and these Protestant groups and Reformed groups, etc., that are coming out, usually the reason that you have a reformation is to adapt to the modern world. But while they're having a reformation, they seem to be really doubling down on some of the older scripture and really taking some things quite literally.
Yeah, so...
which to me does not make any sense of having a reformation whatsoever.
Reformation, but I don't see Hillsong Church, I don't see them, condemning, sex before marriage, gay marriage, those sort of sexually immoral things. I don't see.
No, they're very open. So this is somewhere where this is why Hillsong and your Pentecostal churches have really taken off, because Catholic churches respond to this is the rules. If you break the rules, you are out of the club. That's it. You are out. You're not coming into church. You cannot get married in the church. You can't do this. You can't do that. You're out. Pentecostal churches, they really accept everyone. And that is the lure. Now, the more time that you do spend with Pentecostalism, the more you get approached by more senior members, and you get basically, how to explain?
But why?
It's not really rules per se, but there's preachings
Yeah,
that
I know.
escalate from we're open to everyone to this is how you should live, this is how you should live, and it goes extremely narrow, even more narrow than the Catholic Church.
Okay.
So that is a problem, and the more time that you spend, the more narrow your views about Christianity will become.
Yeah, but
Which, yeah, I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. For me, I don't like it at all. And I do see certain groups using it for bad, and I haven't seen a favourable outcome yet.
Yeah, as to me, the way I see it, we merely, those shadow group or we can call it those backroom dealers. They merely use Hillsong Church as an instrument to accomplish and attain their goals, right? We can't
Yes.
we can't condemn everyone at Hillsong Church, and so we can't.
I'm not condemning the congregation. I am being very, very harsh against the institution itself, because all the institution has to do is come out and say, we do not support this behaviour. Our scripture does not support this behaviour. Our church does not support this behaviour. And as leaders, we do not support this behaviour. And that is something that they won't do. And by keeping silent, they're showing support of that behaviour.
Yeah, still seems shady to me. Yeah, shady. So, yeah, I mean, I also have a doubt to clarify, which you just mentioned. In fact, why how can a church such as Hillsong that pretty much accepts everyone to visit and worship all together, and how can a church like this get accused of not respecting multiculturalism and cultural diversity, because they pretty much accept everyone, right? And yet you are saying that
they do. Okay. Let me go on. I have been speaking mostly about Pentecostalism, so Hillsong is not the only Pentecostal church, and they are actually more open than a lot of other Pentecostal churches. And I think it is more to do with the locations where they open up. And these more extreme groups that I've been talking about actually aren't related to Hillsong, but Hillsong is a member of a larger church organisation.
Okay, the church
organisation. Within that organisation,
hierarchy.
Yes.
Right? So Hillsong Church has a hierarchy, and the hierarchy has higher place than the whole.
Yes. So Hillsong belongs to a Pentecostal church group called ACC.
Okay.
And under ACC, there are a lot of other Pentecostal church groups which do harbour these attitudes. And there's really been a push for this over the last 5 years. And these groups have never spoken up to, like the church groups have never spoken up to condemn the behaviour. So there's only one conclusion I can draw from that. Now, Hillsong has been, I don't see them as part of this ultra-nationalist drive. So they have really adapted to the multicultural world quite well. I don't know whether this is going to end. I have seen in Christian nations where there is people of especially different skin colours, how the book is used to create a class system. And a class system creates a hierarchy, which is sort of the basis of Christian governance. And there's two ways to view Christianity. So if you just follow the teachings of Jesus, it is all about equality. But if you do look a lot, especially at the Older Testament, there is a lot of class systems talked about. And these class systems are used to, for lack of better words, create an underclass, and is good for building societies and protecting your villages. But that is not something that we need in the modern world.
During
maybe in developing nations, but we really don't need it in a developed world. So when people say that we want to have, look, even if you look at organizations like Hillsong and look at any church that has a huge mix of people, you will see that the leaders, the people at the top are always white. Then the people under that are always Asian. And the people under that are always black.
So actually,
there's this hierarchy in Christian churches in Australia, and you see it every single time you see church groups. And everyone embraces everyone, but there's this hierarchy.
But in fact, I don't see that as an insult to my people, to my fellow Singaporeans, Chinese. I don't see that as an insult, because since everything here present on Earth can be seen, we can consider their presence as reasonable presence. So since they exist, they are reasonable things. So if you see someone with no apparent capability or competency in their supposedly competent area or realm of expertise, and you still see him or her doing that particular type of job, he earned or she earned the place by his capabilities. It's not about coincidence, or he or she must have at least acquired something to allow this person to be in that rank. We can't assume the significance of coincidence that much, can we?
Look, if it wasn't if the division wasn't so clear, then we could refute it. We could just say, okay, white people tend to be in this position and Asian people tend to be in this position, which is fine. That's something that just happens through nature, due to inclinations or culture or different things. Name an Asian pope.
Asian pope? I
guarantee you there's 500 million Asian Catholics.
Oh, just in
there has never been one, and there will never be one.
Because I've never been to any Catholic churches nor their events, so I can't actually say anything about it. It's but I can guess.
Look at your Christian churches.
Yeah, based on what I can guess, I have never seen an Asian pope or bishop, whatever, in Catholic churches. From the films I watched, I've never seen it. No.
So if this was just about a cultural thing,
I think it's more cultural,
with so many Asian Catholics, there should be already leaders going up the ranks, and there just isn't.
Yeah, but I don't think that ever matters that much, since we, I don't go to church to earn myself a higher place in society, right? I just wish to have a place of sanctuary, a place of silence, away from the outside noise and persecutions.
So the reason that I brought this up is because we're discussing the church in relation to Australia and if it's doing good or doing bad. Now, there are countries that will benefit from having a class system or a hierarchy. Australia, however, is not one of them.
It's not one of them.
Australia is a country of equality. That's why we have the saying, a fair go.
How about
a fair go means everyone's on equal standing. So having a class system is not something that is pro-Australian. A class system is not an Australian thing.
It's not an Aussie
now,
thing.
These church groups are forcing their own class system within their groups, and that is spilling over into society, then into policy, and affecting all of Australia. And as we have especially the non-religious and the more liberal Australians trying to push for greater equality, we're starting to see a lot of these church groups get very, very, very noisy and actually trying to change the constitution and change the laws in Australia to stop equality. And the biggest organisation behind this is the Australian Christian Lobby, the ACL. And these churches that I talked about
what they did
are really the biggest sponsors of this lobby group.
You know what? What they did really sounds like terrorism and acts of rebels.
It's getting close. I see it as very, very anti-Australian. I do see it as an attack on Australian freedoms.
Yeah, it's terrorism.
And it is. I do think this needs to be fought in government policy for now.
Yeah.
And I hope it stops there and we win it in government policy. Because if we don't win it in government policy and it does go down that road, things are not going to be good in Australia for a few decades.
So
we saw these groups did the same thing in Japan, and you can look it up. If you've heard of the Meiji Restoration.
Meiji Restoration, yes,
Restoration, which is a very famous period, that is about getting these attitudes and these groups the fuck out of Japan.
I did some history.
There was a lot of deaths. There was a lot of deaths over that.
Lots of deaths.
And we're going down the same deaths. And we're going down the same route now.
Deaths. Not deaths. My bad.
So
shit.
Japan's faced this, Germany's faced this, Australia's facing it now.
So you are worrying about that a lot.
I'm currently passport collecting.
What do you mean passports? What did you say just now? Passport.
I'm collecting.
Collecting passports.
Yes.
Are you saying you are making arrangements to depart from Australia? Should that kind of disturbance arise, or
I'm making a plan B.
Plan
yes.
B. Which this plan B must have included departing from Australia.
Yes.
And in term by removing all your ties, your business, and and then severing the ties with severing the ties with Australia, right? That sounds.
I've already over the last 6 months, I've started moving pretty much all of my business to outside of Australia.
Outside of Australia.
Yes, because this government is very unfriendly to innovation and new enterprise. And they're also creating economic policy which is unsustainable. So Australia will very soon have a major recession, which is going to kill a lot of businesses. And then with this looming shift towards a state religion and nationalism, it means that our businesses will be cut off from trading with outsiders, basically, or people that don't really fit the view of who we should be trading with. So at the moment, I'm not doing a lot in Australia. My whole thing in Australia is policy. But there's a lot of strong resistance. So I'm looking at policy regarding freedom of religion. I'm looking at policy on holding up the Constitution and perhaps even strengthening it. I'm looking at policy for innovation, especially for promoting small business and developing regional Australia. And I'm looking for policies that don't create division and do create a more unified Australia and get the various groups to work together. So outside of that, most of my projects are now happening outside of Australia. I am doing while I'm working within Australia, I'm not really trading in Australia anymore. I don't see it as a secure place to do business. There's a huge political risk. So we can look at our neighbours like New Zealand, who are more on the right track and actually have functioning internet. And
agreed. But I've never been to
yes,
Kiwi land yet. No, not yet. Yeah. I mean,
yep.
so where other than New Zealand, do you plan to carry out some part of your current businesses and projects in Japan and in China? How much?
Look, the first place I'm going to focus on is the places whose government policy and basically cultural attitudes are going into a direction that will support small business, will support startups, and will support the concept of social equity over capital. Because I do hold social equity as a higher value than profits. Profits are, of course, important, but I don't think they're a good measure of status or success.
Okay, so
you can do a lot of bad and be very, very profitable.